This is a great pyramid. For centuries, it was the tallest building in the world. It sits perfectly aligned with the North Star, Polaris, and the cardinal directions. Its chambers hold secrets that scientists are only now beginning to uncover. To this day, we're in awe of the genius behind its creation. So much so that when we try to build something equally ambitious, we turn to the Great Pyramid for inspiration. We map out blueprints, prepare materials, and assemble a team. But here's what we don't do. We don't sacrifice 100,000 lives to finish the project or enslave entire villages to complete it. These kinds of projects take decades and plenty of manpower, so we have to make sure that everyone involved gets paid and that the project doesn't harm the environment. But back in 2580 BC, there were no labor laws, no environmental impact studies, no corporate sponsors to raise funds. There was just one man, Pharaoh Khufu, whose idea was to build the largest pyramid of all. He wanted to be buried inside of it, and he didn't care how long it would take or how many people had to die to make it happen. Now, where did such an idea come from? How did someone decide to dedicate their whole reign to building a single monument? Well, it all started with the first pharaoh, King Narmer, who united Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE. Before that, Egypt was split into two separate regions. It was an era known as the early dynastic period. Kings were local leaders who fought for supremacy, each believing that their own region had the purest bloodline. They built small stone hinges to worship their gods and claim their divine right to rule. But it wasn't until King Narmer emerged that a dynasty began. He assembled a military and conquered Lower Egypt. He then returned to Memphis and built his palace in the center, unifying the two kingdoms under one roof. That's why you'll see him depicted wearing the crown of Upper Egypt on his head and the crown of Lower Egypt around his neck. Some historians even say that this dual crown became the origin of the pharaoh's iconic headgear. But regardless of the details, everyone agrees that this moment marked the beginning of Egypt's old kingdom. And at its heart stood the pharaoh, a word that comes from ancient Greek meaning chief of house. This ruler had absolute power and was considered a god among men. The pharaoh's word was law, and even the gods themselves couldn't oppose him. As a result, each pharaoh sought to live up to their divine status. They expanded the kingdom, built new cities, waged wars, and erected monumental tombs. And if they left behind a positive legacy, they were deified after death. But here's where things get interesting. While the pharaoh had ultimate authority, they also had responsibilities. They were expected to keep the kingdom prosperous, maintain social order, and protect the gods at all times. If they failed in any of these matters, the pharaoh could be overthrown. Just think about it. No other civilization had anyone daring to question the king. Not the Chinese, not the Romans, not even the Americans. But ancient Egyptians didn't care about bloodlines or titles. All they cared about was results. And if the pharaoh wasn't delivering, the priests and nobles would conspire and install someone else in their place. Pharaohs like Unas, who reigned from 2494 to 2472 BCE, lived in fear of losing the throne. His tomb bears the scars of a hurried burial. He was originally entombed in a small pyramid, but after his successor took the throne, he was reburied in a bigger one nearby. Not exactly what you'd call a king's final resting place. Meanwhile, Pharaoh Khufu's own son, Pharaoh Khafre, didn't even bother with a pyramid. Instead, he was laid to rest in a massive granite chamber beneath the second largest pyramid at Giza. Maybe his father's example made him lazy, or maybe he knew that his prestige was already secured. There were 6 dynasties that came and went during the Old Kingdom. Then came the Middle Kingdom, which lasted from roughly 2055 to 1773 BCE. By this point, the royal family tree had grown so complicated that nobody could keep track anymore. Most of the pharaohs were nobles who'd seized the throne for themselves and had no connection to Narmer's original line. It got so bad that some rulers were killed by their own relatives. Take, for example, Mentuhotep III. He was the vizier of Thebes, basically a prime minister, when his royal mistress, Queen Sobekneferu, died. Soon after, he had her erased from official records and married his daughter to the throne. In doing so, he established a new royal line that would rule Egypt for another 250 years. As you might imagine though, not everyone was happy with this coup. Over the next few decades, Egypt descended into chaos. splitting once more into several independent regions. The country was in such turmoil that it needed a strong leader to put everything back in order. Enter Mentuhotep II. When he ascended to the throne, he did something unheard of. He reunited Egypt under one banner and ended the Second Intermediate Period, giving way to the New Kingdom. This era lasted from 1543 to 1292 BCE and was the longest of the three kingdoms. It was also the most culturally rich and militarily powerful. Egypt stretched from Nubia to the Levant, including parts of modern Syria and Palestine. During its peak, the Egyptian army was formidable, boasting more than 30,000 soldiers. They raided into Asia, pillaging on city after city, but always returning home with prisoners of war and untold riches. Their haul was so legendary that invaders grew fearful of even crossing the border. It was during this period that the Egyptians peaked in terms of wealth and culture. Their greatest architectural achievements were constructed. Their armies achieved victories that remained undefeated, and their religion reached its greatest heights. With the power to conquer the Near East at their fingertips, the Egyptian elite felt justified in believing that their pharaoh was a god. At the same time, the common folk also embraced this belief, fawning over their leaders and sharing in their divinity. So while the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom had claimed to be divine, it was during the New Kingdom that they were actually treated as such. After the New Kingdom came the Late Period, which lasted from 664 to 332 BCE. Egypt fell under the control of foreign powers, first the Assyrians, then the Persians, and finally the Greeks. Each group brought their own customs and traditions, but none of them were able to wipe out the native Egyptian culture. They tried, but they failed. The reason? Egyptians simply adapted foreign customs to fit their own. For example, when the Persians invaded Egypt in 525 BC, they brought with them a new religion, Zoroastrianism. Now, instead of erasing traditional beliefs, Persian pharaohs built temples to the old gods too. They celebrated both Persian festivals and Egyptian ones, thereby winning over the hearts and minds of the people. Well, Egypt is a testament to the fact that cultures do not just disappear because a stronger force shows up. They assimilate, evolve, and continue living. Even after the Romans came, they built fortresses alongside temples, and Christianity replaced traditional religions. Yet Egyptian influence never faded. In fact, it spread throughout the Mediterranean. Egyptian motifs appeared on Greek and Roman coins. Their gods were depicted in artwork, and even emperors like Augustus and Hadrian dressed up like pharaohs for propaganda. Egyptians may have lost their independence, but their culture continued thriving. It was only a matter of time before it resurfaced. When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt in 1798, he brought along a team of scholars who documented every aspect of Egyptian life, from their ruins to their customs. Suddenly, Europe was obsessed with everything Egyptian. This fascination led to numerous expeditions and excavations. But it wasn't until 1922 that an amateur archaeologist named Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun. The world had found a new pharaoh to fawn over. Newspapers went wild with the headline, "The Discovery of the Century." Carter and his team carefully unearthed everything from golden chariots to ritual staffs, filling museums worldwide with priceless artifacts. Overnight, Egypt became a hotspot for archaeologists. More sites were excavated, more treasures were found, and more people learned about the cradle of civilization. In the following decades, Hollywood studios released film after film about the land of the pharaohs. We had adventures with the young Indiana Jones, epic clashes between the Egyptian gods, and tales of a lost city of gold. However, perhaps the biggest gift Egypt gave to the world was its legacy. We may not believe in Anubis or Ra anymore, but we still revere the ingenuity of the builders who created the pyramids. We may not wear linen clothes or use papyrus for paper, but we do have movies like Black Panther to thank for bringing those elements to the mainstream. We may not sacrifice animals to appease the gods, but we do stand in awe of the pharaohs' lavish tombs. In a strange way, ancient Egypt continues to thrive within us, inspiring us to be better storytellers, architects, and dreamers. So the next time you hear the word pyramid or mummy, remember that there's more to it than meets the eye. Beneath the sands of time lies a civilization that dared to reach the heavens and succeeded.